Welcome, everybody, into another episode of the It's the Pictures podcast. This is episode 164, and I'm your host, Max Colville. Joining me for one of the last times is my esteemed co-host, John Gilpatrick. Hello, John.
Gilpatrick. We've had 164 episodes. It's okay. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good.
What's new?
Enjoying the award season, if you will. We're coming up on the Oscars soon, and we're actually live from the SAG Awards. If anybody is wanting to listen,
Who are you wearing tonight, Max?
I'm wearing Calvin Klein.
It's funny you say that because last weekend I was in New York City and I saw the Back to the Future musical, which was pretty fun. And obviously, if you know Back to the Future, Calvin Klein is what Marty McFly goes by when he goes back in time and meets his, very thirsty mother. So it's kind of funny you say that.
Well, it's not just John joining us tonight.
No.
Also, we have a guest with us tonight, and our guest is Tom Knoblauch. Good evening, Tom.
Hello, happy to be here, guys.
Yes, Tom is joining us for our topic this evening, and we've been trying to get him on for a few weeks now, maybe months. You know how these things work. But I'm glad he's here with us now. Tom, can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and where they can see your writings or readings about movies?
Yeah, so I'm a writer in a few different ways, and also mainly what I do is broadcasting. I did a public radio show called Riverside Chats for 5 or 6 years, and then I just launched a new one on it's syndicated on Public Radio Exchange called The Entertainment, which is all about cultural trends and how they manifest through our screens. Like we just did this big series on Whit Stillman where we talked to him, we talked to some of his collaborators, we talked to some critics about him. And we just recorded one on Walk Hard and its legacy and biopics still. So that's a lot of fun, and that's up wherever you get podcasts, or you can find that and any writing I do, or a lot of the writing I do anyway, on theentertainment.substack.com. And then I'm also a filmmaker. I've made several micro budget movies that are they're out in the usual spots, and I recently saw a few people on Letterboxd have been labeling them as post mumblecore, which is not a movement that A, I was aware of, or B, I was actively trying to be in. I'm Midwestern, so I guess people are like, okay, Swanberg and his people, they're Chicago. I'm in Nebraska, where there's not much of a movie making scene. I've done a couple things that are kind of like a separation or two away from Swanberg, but I was not part of a movement, and I don't know that it is a movement. It might just be an insult to say that. I don't know. Is Mumblecore still around? I don't think it is.
I don't think so.
Yeah, it depends.
I mean, Greta Gerwig's making the biggest movies in the world right now.
Yeah, and nobody's heard from Swanberg in like 5 years.
No.
So, yeah, anyway, yeah, so I do a bunch of that kind of stuff. It's all out there. And Alex Garland is not someone I've really done any writing about, but I felt the need to defend him because this new Civil War movie is coming out and everybody on Twitter hates him now. And I think they're being a little unfair. So I'm glad you guys gave me this platform.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're going to talk about, Tom, tonight. We're going to talk about writer-director Alex Garland and the movies that he's contributed to and made. And it's funny, like, how fast things went sour for him, and we'll certainly talk about more. It's like Men came out, and people just were like, yeah, this is not it. And it's like, this guy made so many good movies before that. So we'll see, and we'll certainly get more into that. But, Tom, I'm glad you mentioned Walk Hard, because one of the biggest pieces of news over the past week was that Apple and Sony, Apple Corp, that is, are teaming up together to make 4 new Beatles biopics.
That's right. And there's some of the writing on Walk Hard has talked about, they track what they call Walk Hard-isms. Dan Kois wrote a nice piece about this, where you just can't escape all of the tropes that Walk Hard is making fun of. Even though people are not making parodies, they still basically use the grammar of Walk Hard, and I'm sure we're going to see a lot of that in these Beatles movies.
Right. So the idea is that Sam Mendes is going to be the leading this charge, the director. He's more known more recently for his pair of James Bond movies. Each Beatle is going to get his own documentary, and like, well, not documentary, biopic, and they're going to have like an actor playing that Beatle. And I don't know, man. I just like, maybe like John and Paul would be interesting. Maybe some of George, but like, I don't need a Ringo Starr biopic. John, have you heard much about this news, or do you have any thoughts?
I saw a lot of like, people taking, different groups of four men and saying like, who's who, kind of like little meme stuff. So I'm definitely like aware that this is happening. I don't really know too much detail, but I don't think anybody does, and it's just the internet kind of having fun speculating as to what this is going to entail. Like, frankly, like I'm pretty uninterested. But like I like the idea that, oh, maybe the Ringo version is going to be puppets or something like that ridiculous. So like that kind of stuff, I'm like, yeah, all right, like, yeah, let's get like weird. Sure.
I think this is where Sam Mendes tells you more, right? If it was just they announced
Oh,
them,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
but we sort of can assume we're not going to get a weird out of left field choice out of any of these things.
I mean, it would be fun if they had four different filmmakers involved and you can like kind of imagine their interpretation.
You imagine?
Oh, sorry. But yeah, like something like that, you're like, all right, this could go someplace, but what we're gonna end up seeing, I think, is gonna be pretty paint by numbers, which, you know, whatever.
Yeah, and it's funny. I mean, obviously, why does any movie get made is for the money, but it's the Beatles are no lack of a subject of being covered, right? There's countless documentaries and concert films, and they had their own feature films, so they're not unfamiliar figures to the world of motion pictures. But I guess on to be a pro side, to have some positive about this, like, we did get a really good Austin Butler performance in Elvis. Like, maybe if they could find the right guys, it could be at least interesting. I think I'd be more interesting in like the kind of performances that we got from the Elton John and Elvis biopics, as opposed to the Bohemian Rhapsody biopic.
Yeah.
But we'll see what direction they go in.
I think a
I
difference though is like Elvis he was this interesting charismatic
mm.
figure. I don't know that Ringo really is, so they have to like invent the character to make him interesting.
Yeah, a whole movie. It's just maybe it'll be a short.
Yeah, and then like the idea, I guess, was like they would all come out in the same fiscal year, or like the same like calendar year, like all four movies, and like, wouldn't they kind of like eat into their profits? I don't know. They'll figure that out. Like I like to say on this show a lot, is a lot of these decisions are above my pay grade, and I'm glad I don't have to make them. But I just get to sit around and see what happens next. But moving on, we haven't talked since the Super Bowl, and even though John and I had nobody on either our sides in the Super Bowl, I'd say it was a pretty entertaining game, regardless. With the second ever overtime game in the Super Bowl. But more notably, I think, was all the trailers. And John and I had discussed like some of the ones that we thought would be there, and it was all those and a lot more. It felt like everybody was participating. I think one of the gripes I wrote about it on the Substack, was that um a lot of the ads were like 15-second spots, and then they were like, oh, if you want to see like the actual trailer, go online, but we're only going to buy this 15-second slot because it's so expensive, and we're using it just to tell you that the movie exists, but if you want to see more. The one that really spent big was, of course, Wicked, which I think spent like a full minute to show the entire trailer during the Super Bowl. Let's throw it over to John. John, did you see anything interesting out of those trailers, or was there a movie that you didn't know about that like sparked your interest?
Not really. I mean, probably the most interesting was that like Wicked looked like shit, uh, which I was kind of bummed. But like, yeah, it just did not get me psyched for that movie at all. It's the opposite of that. Um, I can't remember if I already meant. I think I mentioned this when we talked, but I had seen the Quiet Place Part Two trailer online before the Super Bowl. I don't know if that was a leak or if it was just planned to go online first, but um, I was not really like not sorry, I said A Quiet Place Part 2, but whatever the
Yeah,
prequel
day
is
one,
called
I
these
think.
days. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was not super excited about that movie, but I'm definitely a lot more so now. So that was, I think, a positive. Otherwise, like, really don't remember a ton, if I'm being totally honest. Like, nothing grabbed my attention, that's for sure.
Tom, did you partake in the game or catch any trailers afterwards?
I did watch it. I saw the 15-second versions of them. I don't know that I actually went to look at the longer ones. There was Deadpool, right? Everyone was kind of talking about
Yeah.
that. I don't have a lot of patience for Deadpool to begin with, so I didn't watch the full one. I don't know
Yeah.
if anything else got my eye.
Yeah, for me, we had talked about during our anticipated films that I wanted to see Twisters, and they showed a spot for that during the Super Bowl that I was excited to see. And my wife was like, "Oh, I'm not really on board for Twister sequel," and then she saw the trailer and she's like, "I hate to say it, but I'm kind of interested in this now." So I guess that worked. Outside of that, for me, they did the gamut. I think you guys said the big ones were Wicked and of course Deadpool and Wolverine. Those were the biggest spots. And I can't remember a whole lot more, so I don't know if that says a lot for those movies that spent all that big bucks to get seen on the biggest stage. But it was funny. I was thinking about like just how much these people pay for trailers, and since the game went to overtime, there was like a Monkey Man trailer like set for like after when the game was supposed to air. I was like, oh, did they get like a discounted rate? And
I was
like,
wondering about this too.
yeah, I was like, this is like something like I'll never know the answer to. But I was just like, oh, they must have been like jumping up and down, saying like, oh yeah, we people are seeing our trailer because the game's going longer, and we didn't have to pay as much.
Yeah, that's going to be the new coveted spot,
I
probably.
was gonna say everybody's gonna be buying post game ads now. It's like, all right, we got that, whatever it is, 10-1 overtime shot.
Yeah, yeah, right. It's like they hit the lottery, right? Moving on, like I said at the top of the program, we are recording during the Screen Actors Guild Awards. I think this is the last ceremony before the Oscars takes place in like 2 weeks' time. And I think the BAFTAs did their thing, and we've seen um, a lot of precursors go the way of Oppenheimer, which is kind of what we expected all along. With Christopher Nolan winning the DGA. What was funny, John, I saw the WGA decided to hold their awards for after the Oscars this year, which
That is
was just
bizarre.
yeah, it was just I don't know what they were thinking or like if they even care, but that's when that's scheduled to happen. Um, but yeah, I think I don't think like the event will be that exciting. If you want to know like how any of the actors awards are heating up, then the Screen Actors Guild is on. Why we're talking? I mean, obviously this won't go up until a few days later, but yeah, I'd point you to check the results of this because this will have a big play on whether or not Emma Stone is the shoe in to win Best Actress or um, if someone else can come in there and take the award from her. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, yeah, that's what to do. John, you said like you were kind of peeking over at the Screen Actors Guild Awards, and it's the first time that like they're on Netflix, and I guess they're holding a live event, which is kind of odd
Yeah,
because like
totally.
yeah, Netflix is not known for their live events, and it was funny. I was watching like for like 5 minutes, and like um one of the men from um whatchamacallit, Queer Eye was in the back interviewing people. And it just seems so awkward because like they don't have like commercial breaks. So it's like, oh yeah, can you just like kind of stretch out time for a little bit? And it's just I guess it's an interesting first take at an award show for Netflix.
Yeah, and it was a little bit clumsy from what I saw, um I guess they didn't the other thing that was weird is they didn't advertise like it, at least when I turned on Netflix, because I saw an ad and I was like, stream now the SAG Awards. I was like, oh, that sounds like fun. And so I turned it on and it was still pre-show. But like on Netflix, I had to search for SAG for it to come up. It wasn't in a banner. It wasn't even on like the first handful of like little panels that are like presented. And I'm going down looking for SAG and nothing. So then I had to search for it and it comes up, which I thought was just insanity. Yeah, that's going on right now. So if you're curious, the only like major film award that's been given out so far was female actor supporting role to, of course, Divine Joy Randolph in The Holdovers. So I think the lockiest of locks come Oscar time, um, in that category. Hard to imagine like a more prohibitive favorite amongst at least the bigger categories. So, we'll dip in periodically. Certainly, if there's a surprise, maybe we can pause and talk about it. But everything else has been television or miniseries related. So we'll see what else is coming as the film awards go on.
It's kind of funny to be recording a podcast about movies and have this like breaking news, like, oh, we have to stop because so and so won. It's like the election night coverage thing.
We've never done this before, and I was like, this will be kind of fun. But I'm just imagining, like, if freaking something totally unexpected happens, and we're like, oh well, this is like kind of newsworthy. We should probably discuss it and its implications for the Oscars. But
I mean,
I don't know it seems unlikely. It seems like all these categories. I mean, lead actor and lead actress may be like a little bit up in the air still, um, but no major surprises, I don't think.
what's funny is that with all the award show and the Emmys being delayed, it's like if like the Emmys and the SAG should match like hand in hand. So it's that all the TV stuff shouldn't be much of a surprise at all. So maybe the whole night is just to pat each other on the back. Tom, I know that you obviously have an interest in movies. Does that extend to award season?
As kind of a curiosity, certainly, what they decide is important is kind of interesting. I think when I was younger, it was easier to feel really invested and feel really outraged by what they picked that isn't what I would have picked. So I don't lose sleep over it, but I do generally watch them. Yeah.
Yeah, because certainly, I mean, like, John and I have picked in critics groups for a lot of years, and maybe that adds to our investment in these things. But, um, it certainly, as I've grown as a movie watcher and a critic, I realize that maybe my taste isn't always aligned with these big winners. But then sometimes, it's just a consensus film, and it still kind of works out to be something that I really love. It's rare, be it like, let's say like a Green Book year, that like something that doesn't even show up in my top 10 actually wins Best Picture.
Yeah, I don't know how you guys feel about it. My big complaint with awards is that comedy is not considered important enough to win awards. Whereas as a viewer, for me, if I go back to like the movies I'm going to rewatch from the last year, 10 years from now, are probably all going to be the ones that I think are funny. They're not like I'm not going to be rewatching Zone of Interest every year. That doesn't mean it's a bad. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with Zone of Interest, but I don't know how consensus generally forms around like if it's goofy, it probably isn't an awards movie, except for the very rare exception.
John, do you want to send an opinion on this one?
on whether I'll rewatch Zone of Interest regularly.
Or or whether or not you find yourself that you would rather rewatch comedies as opposed to something that's as deeply serious as Zone of Interest.
I mean, yeah, I think that that's definitely true. Doesn't mean like I wouldn't rewatch like a heavier movie, but like we'll talk about a little bit later on. I finally caught up with Killers of the Flower Moon, and one of the first things I thought when I watched that was like, oh dang, I kind of would like to watch this again. I need to find 18 hours to do that. Um, but but yeah, like it doesn't have to be comedic, but like an action movie certainly for sure. Like, but Zone of Interest, which I've seen also now, I don't know that like I'm eager to watch that again. It tends to be just stuff that like I can have some fun with and also like not pay super close attention to.
Yeah, that makes sense, and certainly, I think like a lot of populist films are stuff that are generally easier to watch, or I don't know, elicit more laughs. I think that those are tend to be the movies that do better. If you look at, of course, the Barbenheimer thing between Barbie and Oppenheimer, I mean, it's easy just to point right there and say, yeah, Barbie's more of a comedy than a drama, and it's seen as the less serious and maybe less important film for prestige just because of what it is, as opposed to this big heavy biopic with the atomic bomb, and not only the weight of uh, causing war all the time, but the weight on one shoulder who enabled that to happen.
Or here's an example. Since we already talked about Walk Hard, that's a movie. John C. Reilly's performance in that, I think, much more multifaceted, impressive, difficult to pull off than lip syncing to Queen songs. But it would never get nominated for Best Actor.
Right? No,
Yeah, definitely not.
yeah, I get it, and like maybe it was even a stretch for some people to go with Ryan Gosling as Ken. I mean, because like the movie was so well regarded, but so that helped him. But yeah, typically those are the type of roles that are like, oh yeah, I enjoyed myself, but it didn't have the weight that something else does. But yeah, I think that's gonna do it for the news today, and we're gonna move on to our topic of the week. Um, I thought it was particularly great timing by Tom to suggest Alex Garland with Civil War coming out. We generally like to tie our directors to upcoming movies for no other reason but to be entertaining and topical. So why we don't have anything invested in Civil War and whether or not it does good or not, or is a good film. We are interested in looking back at Alex Garland's career and exactly where he got started from, and how he's now uh, on the precipice of releasing his fourth directed feature. There was news the other day. There was not only a new trailer for for Civil War, but news that Civil War is going to have a sneak preview at the South by Southwest Film Festival. So people will be viewing the film very soon. Um, so Tom, did you want to like lead off the conversation with Alex
Sure.
Garland? Do you want to start with his beginnings, or would you like me to?
Yeah, I can start with
Okay.
sort of where I came from to pitch this, which was um, the Civil War. So this new movie, it's an A24 movie. It seems to be part of A24's reorganization to try to make bigger type of movies that have bigger budgets and broader sort of audience demographics. And so I believe it's the most expensive A24 movie. It's 50 or $60 million. So bigger than budgets he's worked with before, big for A24, and trying to be, I think, kind of a broad, relevant action movie thriller for an election year, in a particularly a time when people do talk about splitting up the union and splitting up, America. Is America working? Is certainly something I think a lot of people wonder all the time, wherever you are politically. So I guess I start from this perspective, which is that's an interesting starting point for a movie. That's an interesting way to think about trying to figure out how do you turn that into a narrative that is also broad and is not, doing the weird sort of both sidesism of the Damon Lindelof Hunt movie, or also isn't just trying to like sort of snidely agree with the people who already have, whatever politics Alex Garland has. Um, but what I've noticed in the reaction to the trailer, it was almost entirely negative. Uh, Twitter just tears the movie apart already. It seems like most people have decided that it's dumb, it's bad, it's lame, it doesn't make any sense from the 2 minutes we've seen, which seemed a little premature to me. And I was thinking, or I looked specifically at an AV Club article right before we recorded here, which said that it didn't like it seemed dumb, it didn't seem smart, it didn't seem realistic. And I guess it's weird to think about that in the context of America as a country which is dumb and does dumb things all the time. And like the dialogue in the trailer being dumb doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot for me. So where I'm going with all of this is it's weird to have prejudged Garland because he made one horror movie people didn't really like, when the guy's made a lot of near classics really of the last couple decades, and at least really well regarded movies that have staying power. So I thought it's worth looking back at what is Alex Garland's deal? Is it right to write him off because he made maybe one misfire after several movies that are generally regarded pretty well? Or, I don't know. Can we maybe expect something out of Civil War that's more than just big, dumb, broad action movie? Which I think so. I think he's a really interesting filmmaker. So he, to sort of set the story, I guess, he started off as a novelist. He wrote The Beach, which was a big success, got adapted into Danny Boyle's movie. Then he and Danny Boyle, of course, become a good team for a little while, for two movies before they have a little bit of a falling out. So that leads to 28 Days Later, which is his first written feature. And I think it's the first one I saw by him. I didn't see it in theaters. I think I saw it on TV. Do you guys remember when you first saw 28 Days Later?
John, do you want to go first?
28 Days Later, I remember seeing it on video like not long after it came out, and I didn't get it, but I was also like in 8th grade at the time.
Yeah, right.
So I think probably a little bit like, over my head for what I was expecting out of a zombie movie.
Yeah, for me, yeah, I'd have to say the same thing. I wasn't always big in horror. It wasn't until later in my life that I really jumped on it. But I think there was a curiosity certainly about 28 Days Later, whether it be like the really like guerrilla filming that they used and how it looks like almost documentary, and just how visceral it can be. And then it all began with that like running zombie thing. It's like people were like, "Oh, this is really where it kind of originated," because zombies were supposed to be known as like these slow lumbering things, and so it had a lot of interesting additions to the genre. So yeah, I think I watched it, and I was pretty impressed with that one for sure.
Yeah, and I think the style, it doesn't really look good, right? Like even watching it now, it's the movie weirdly, even though they're making a sequel, another sequel, it's out of print and you can't stream it. So somebody was sharing a link to it, like the Blu-ray rip, and I was looking at that a little bit ago, and it's kind of like watching Inland Empire, where you're sort of like, you can only clean this up.
Right? Yeah, it's like a 480p movie.
Yeah. Which kind of works for what it's trying to do, because it feels uncomfortable and grimy, and you can never really get it. It's never beautiful at any moment, and it's not supposed to be.
Yeah, there's no reason for this to ever get like a 4K UHD release, and
Right.
it can
Yeah.
never be seen that way.
And at the time that wasn't so unusual. I think we in the early 2000s, you had a lot of tolerance for stuff that just didn't look good, that you couldn't get in a high resolution. And so I kind of have memories of seeing it forever ago, and just that grimy feeling really leaving an impact on me. And whatever it was, it definitely piqued my interest with Sunshine when that came out, which I think is the first Garland related project I did see in theaters. And you guys like Sunshine? I know you wanted to put it on our list, even though we didn't direct it. It was another Boyle one.
I love Sunshine.
Yeah, yeah. John and I talked about it a bunch of episodes back. I think. What were you watching? Listening to Blank Check, John, and that's why you watched it
I'm
again?
trying to remember, why did I bring up Sunshine? I mean, I definitely did watch it when they covered Danny Boyle. Um, I can't think of. Oh, we do a Michelle Yeoh episode last Oscar season, because she's in that
Yeah, we did.
sort of. I think that's maybe when I watched it, because it might have been around the same time. But yes, no, I love Sunshine. I know a lot of people argue that it's like 2/3 of a great movie and 1/3 of a terrible movie. I think it's 2/3 of a great movie and 1/3 of a good movie. That it's just definitely like a little bit of a letdown as you kind of reach the conclusion. But like I remember seeing it in a theater. That one I saw in a theater when it came out, and I might have been like one of 7 people that did. But it was just the imagery on a big screen, and the sound also was really sensational. And yeah, I just think, I mean, and the cast now is like it's a pretty wild cast between Cillian Murphy and Michelle Yeoh, Chris Evans in kind of a supporting role, like just a lot of interesting actors.
Oscar winners and nominees, right?
Yeah, yeah, really, it's kind of all these years later, but yeah, no, it's a I love that movie. I think it's really interesting. And I'm thinking, was this the his last writing credit before he would direct Ex Machina?
No,
No.
he still had.
Oh, Ex Machina is later. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, see, he writes Dread and Never Let Me Go, and
Oh, yeah. Wow. Okay.
there might be another one in there, but I know he basically had a falling out with Boyle over
Yeah.
the script of Sunshine, which seems to at least lay the seeds for him wanting to become a director to have that control that he didn't have on Sunshine.
Yeah. Sure. So that makes sense.
I think there's a lot of things about Sunshine that is just like, really clever, though. Like, at least like the way, like, certainly I'm not as well read as other people, so like maybe at that time my science fiction really came from what I was seeing in movies, and just like a lot of like world building that they did in Sunshine kind of feels like, hey, this is like almost feasible, believable, like, oh, they're building a whole ecosystem inside the ship, and it's like things that like maybe science fiction movies didn't really touch upon that much at that point. Certainly now everybody's like, oh yeah, we need a forest on our ship, to survive. But yeah, I just thought like there's a lot of like interesting, clever things that it does, and similar to 28 Days Later. I think that whether or not that's just Alex Garland's pen and his mind, or if that was in a collaboration with Danny Boyle.
Yeah, I think between those two, you get a good sense of Garland as filtered through Boyle. But I think of those two scripts, you can tell there's a smart guy who likes genre and knows how to use genre to sort of explore either social anxieties or some of his concepts about human nature that he keeps going back to. And I think when he leans into that impulse of using genre to bring out whatever ideas he has, it tends to work pretty well. Whereas some of the later ones, I think he gets a little concerned with making sure you know how smart he is, and that takes front seat in a way that doesn't work as well. Like there's a difference between smartly telling a story and trying to tell a smart story, and he shines with the first, not the latter.
Right. And so one of the two movies that you said were the later ones that he wrote was Dread, which was a new take on the Judge Dredd graphic novel. And this one starred Carl Urban. I just recently caught up with it in anticipation of doing this podcast. And I think for a lot of years I was interested in it because of the cult following it's had. It's like a lot of people watched it. It wasn't really a big winner at the box office. It just barely made back its money, and so like even though there's lots of fans of it, chances of a sequel are always nil. No, I it's a pretty cool movie. It's really really violent. They have some cool slow motion action sequences at the very beginning. He kind of like lets that go instead of like getting too much into it and repeating it over and over again. So maybe that's smart because I enjoyed it at the beginning, and he him and whoever directed it, I really don't even remember who was the director of Dread. It didn't matter to me.
Well, it's funny because that's the one where there's all the rumors. I don't know how true they are that there were disagreements in the edit, and that the director of the movie was sort of kicked out of the post production process, and Garland took it over in what would be kind of like his trial run at becoming a director.
Yeah, I could see that. But there was I also remembered a lot of comparisons to like the other action movie, The Raid.
Mhm.
when that came out, and similar violence, similar setup where like in Dread he has to like go up a residential area, which is basically almost like a tower, and floor by floor until he gets to the top, till he gets to the enemy. And in the same way that the raid is kind of set up in its action. um, I was entertained. I didn't regret my time with it. I thought it was a pretty neat movie. I don't, Tom, is this one that you've checked out before?
Oh yeah, yeah. I would say for what I was just saying, this is Garland at his least pretentious, right? It's just a fast, fun ride of a movie, and he's good at that. And I think somewhere between the two is usually my favorite mode of his, but totally unsubtle, totally just going for like the fun, cool beats. And it almost works, even though it's technically a comic book movie. It feels sort of like it's drawing from 90s and 80s R-rated action movies in sort of fun
Yeah.
ways. So yeah, no, I think it's fun, and Garland doesn't always want to have fun, but I like when he's in that mood.
Yeah, John, I'm not sure that this would be on your radar, but is this one that you've certainly heard about?
Yeah, I've heard of it. I think at the time when it was coming out, I was kind of like just dismissive of it because it seemed like a pretty schlocky movie, but I know that over the years, like people have stumped for it pretty hard. Not to the point where I was like, I need to check it out, which,
Right.
I don't know, maybe I'm missing out, but
No,
it has like
it's
it has like a vibe to it for sure that
yeah,
like
it's
I
a
can
neat
probably
little
get on
action
with.
movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because he writes that around the same time he adapts Kazuo Ishiguro's book Never Let Me Go, which is about as tonally opposite as you could get. It's this subdued, slightly elevated sci-fi story that's just tragic and horrifically sad all the way through. So I guess he worked both sides of his emotions out between the two projects at about the same time.
Yeah. But yeah, he quickly moved on, right, Tom? He finally got his chance behind the director's chair, and Ex Machina was that big movie, right?
Yeah, so that's his directorial debut, and that Never Let Me Go and Devs, his FX series, I think all are for me his most successful, and they're I think what works with them is they have fairly simple dramatic stakes. They are not the genre elements are more subtle in each of them, and all three sort of put a sci-fi conceit into a fairly recognizable world. And interestingly, they're all sort of about these doomed characters trying to transcend humanity in various ways. And he is able to pull that off. I think each of them is, I mean, to sort of varying degrees, satisfying. Ex Machina is, I think, the one that's just the most easily rewatchable of his career. I've watched it over and over again, and you get this great performance by Oscar Isaac, and you've got Domhnall Gleeson. And Garland and the Coens are maybe the only people who've figured out how to use Oscar Isaac to full effect. I think, which there's something about he needs to be tired and irritable, and then he's great.
That's good. Yeah, and then of course, also in there, Tom, is Alicia Vikander, who this is like her coming out party. I don't know if a lot of people knew who she was before this.
Yeah, no, and she's great in it. And just the conceit of the movie is so fun, which is the Turing test plus sexuality. How does that impact the person evaluating it, right? Which is it's simple and it's got this great visual style, this great momentum the whole time. And I think rewatching it, it's fun to see the complexity that you're not totally sure of because you're looking in the wrong directions the first time you watch it. But I love it. I think it's a great movie.
John, I think I remember you being pretty fond of this one, right?
Yeah, I do. Again, it's just like I think a pretty good vibes movie. Um I think I felt like there was pretty high expectations for it when it was coming out. And I don't entirely know what that was based on because like he didn't have like such an extensive track record. Um but I felt like uh people were just pretty jazzed for it, and I feel like it lives up to expectations. It's not a movie I've revisited, weirdly enough, as fond of it as I was at the time. But I think it probably holds up pretty well.
It's funny. This is one of those movies for me. Like I haven't watched in a long time, and certainly, I think the Oscar Isaac dancing meme has kind of uh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was thinking that too.
kind of been the pinnacle of this movie in society's mind. Certainly
Well,
people.
deservedly so. It's a great scene.
Yeah, right. But yeah, people see that and they're like, "Oh, what movie is that from?" And that's might be where it draws them into. Um, yeah, I don't know. You know, I think I enjoy a lot of like when we started this conversation. I enjoy like 20 Days Later and Sunshine. And I enjoyed Dread. I think like with the next movie we talk about, I'm gonna also enjoy, but maybe that is based upon my history of it. I read the book before the movie came out, but this one, I don't know. Maybe it's I haven't seen it in a long time, but I'm just like it was okay. I don't feel like this is the pinnacle of his career for sure.
Yeah, Annihilation, I assume you're talking about.
Yes, that was the next one he'd direct.
Yeah, I'd read the book as well before it came out, and I don't think it's a good adaptation of the book. Really, Garland's seems like he's working more with Stalker and Tarkovsky and kind of working some of that through his system, and less with trying to tell that particular story. And I think it's one that sort of is him trying to show off a little bit, and it's like he kind of figured out a mood and he figured out the atmosphere. I think particularly the last 30 minutes of Annihilation are really interesting, but it's pretty uneven up to that point. And I just don't feel like he knew what to do with his characters. It's like he just figured out the imagery and thought that would be enough, maybe because Ex Machina had a nice momentum. But Annihilation, I don't dislike it, but yeah, it's kind of a slog to go back to.
Yeah, I think I agree with you totally that like I think he took the text of Annihilation and just used it as like the basis. It is not a very close telling of that novel, and certainly the author would go on to write um more stories, and I think it's called the Southern Reach series,
Yeah.
and there's still like a fourth book expected to come out soon.
Did you see the author Jeff Vanderby? He also wrote a scathing review of Men. I forget remember the
No.
publication, but I don't know if that's the only time that an author who has had a work adapted goes on to just totally trash in a professional review the subsequent movie by the same filmmaker.
That's rough. Yeah, but no, I mean the cast of Annihilation was really exciting. If I remember correctly, I don't have the cast in front of me. I think it's like Tessa Thompson and Natalie Portman.
And Oscar Isaac again, although he doesn't do any dancing this time.
Right. Um, but yeah, it was a lot of vibes. I remember like there's certainly things that live in my mind viscerally, whether it be like the adjacent bear. It's not like quite a bear, but it kind of looks like one, or one of the characters growing into like a tree. Like these images that are definitely more prominent than maybe where the story actually goes. John, have you seen Annihilation, or you have a history of this one?
Yeah, I saw it when it came out. I didn't see it in the theater. I felt kind of let down by it at the time, but it definitely is another movie that kind of just like lingered with me. And I remember revisiting it roughly a year later or so and thinking like, oh, actually, like this is really interesting. I think that kind of like Ex Machina, like this one's reputation gets consumed by a dance sequence, but in a different sort of way. um, but like I think all that like kind of works too. It just like is a little bit unsettling in a way, not like unsettling thematically, but unsettling in terms of like the way the material is being presented. It's just sort of like hard to wrap your head around. But I think like it's a pretty well made movie with some interesting stuff happening within it.
Yeah, I think when he there's something he seems to think is kind of admirable about not being able to wrap your head around elements of a story, which sometimes works but doesn't always. I think with Annihilation and Men, he's sometimes a little too proud of being abstract or abstruse, and he also did that. I'd read some of his books, like The Beach. Obviously, was this big hit, becomes a big movie. And then the Tesseract is his second book, which I had read it a year or two ago, and even as I was reading it, I'm sort of like, I don't really know what this is about. I mean, I guess it's got a nice style, and I think sometimes as a filmmaker he goes there, but as for sort of where I started this whole thing, if your misfires look like Annihilation, you're still a pretty good filmmaker. And I think Garland is always interesting, even if I don't love what he's doing.
Well, Tom, I think John and I are gonna lean on you a little bit more for the next category of Alex Garland. I know people really I think they enjoyed Devs. I have not seen that. But I definitely think that that's worth mentioning if you have a history with that.
Yeah.
And certainly John and I don't believe caught up with men at
Oh,
all. Um,
it's a wild
uh,
one.
yeah, so yeah, we're gonna lean on you for a little bit
Sure.
to give this next section of Alex Garland.
So Devs, I really like. I think kind of like we've sort of talked about with some of these other ones, he has a great lead up, great first two thirds, and then a good two thirds to use the way John talked about Sunshine, or a good final third. But Devs he's back in Ex Machina territory to some extent. It's again about this sort of tech genius who has this new thing that he's discovered or invented that he thinks will sort of be this paradigm shift for everything in existence. And again, it's kind of that struggle of this guy wants to become a god, and then this person who works in his organization who he is up against. And so in that one, you've got Nick Offerman, who has designed this machine that can sort of project any point in time in history. So he can discover all this data about any time and also the future up to a certain point. And so it sort of becomes about what happens at that point, and he's fixated on one of his lower level employees who he's sure is integral to whatever is going to happen at that point, which is possibly apocalyptic. We don't really know. And I thought it was a fun mystery, fun characters. It stars Sonoya Mizuno, who is the person dancing with Oscar Isaac in Ex Machina. So it's got kind of the same troupe that he now is reassembled for Civil War. And it's fun to see him with this broader tapestry where he gets to kind of relax. And as I'd said earlier, this one's more grounded. It's not as out there as Annihilation or Men or even Sunshine. So the characters are fairly straightforward. You've got kind of romance, you've got a little bit of comedy, human tragedy, and the sci-fi conceit. So he's really trying a lot of things with it, and I think it works pretty well. Nick Offerman's very, very good in it. And it's nice to see that as kind of a bridge between his Ron Swanson memification and becoming this actor who now won an Emmy right this year. So
Right. No, I was gonna make sure to ask you about that. Like, this is certainly more of a dramatic role for him, right? As
oh yeah,
opposed to his Parks and Rec stuff. And Devs is what was it, 6 episodes for FX, or was it
8 episodes I think.
okay,
Um,
8 episodes? So.
and it's maybe a little long, and I think it comes out of this time we're in now, which is there's a lot of pressure, it seems like, for filmmakers to, if you can make your movie a miniseries, it might be easier to get it made, so do that. But I like it. I think it's a good show.
Yeah, I watched one of those for review recently for Roger Ebert, and it was like this new show with Numi Rapace that's on Apple TV Plus, Constellation, and it definitely like comes across as like a TV show that would be better as like a 2 hour movie as opposed to like an 8 hour and then continuing TV show.
Yeah. I mean, I don't blame them because you got to get your stuff made somehow. But man, it can be a little grating when you're on hour 6 and you're like, oh, the plot's starting. Great.
Oh boy.
Um,
Yeah, and then after Devs, he'd go into he's now working all the time with A24, right? And so he'd get another movie with them with Men
yeah,
and Jesse Buckley as the lead here.
yeah. So Men, if I recall correctly, after Devs, he originally was talking about doing another miniseries with FX that was going to be about civil disobedience. And it was going to have most of the same cast as Devs. And I don't know if that evolved into Civil War, but he said something about, I think it was the protests, I think like the George Floyd stuff happened, and there was something in it that he felt was a little too close, and he didn't really want to go there. So he dusted off an old script that he had written, I think shortly after 28 Days Later, which became Men, and I think he rewrote it. And also, this was around the time of the pandemic, and so he needed something that he could shoot in a contained way with a small cast. And so he goes back to this, and it's ostensibly a folk horror movie. And I'm not the first to point out, but the fact that it is called Men seems to have really kind of warped the reaction to it, because it makes it into a statement about men as opposed to a weird folk horror movie. But the general conceit is you have Jessie Buckley, who is a widow under kind of I don't know, ambiguous circumstances where her husband maybe slipped, maybe killed himself, and she basically needs to get away from everything and the abusive relationship she was in. And so she goes to this English countryside cottage that she rents, and all the men in this village are played by Rory Kinnear, who is just sort of like this sinister male presence. And it slowly gets weirder and weirder and more surreal until there's this body horror nightmare finale that really turned a lot of people off. And it I think is, again, we're back into him sort of being abstract and being hard to follow, and you're sort of like, I don't know exactly what was going on there, other than the movie is called Men, therefore I guess it's some kind of men or bad statement. And people weren't very satisfied with that. It didn't seem like enough, I think.
Yeah, I mean, like being on the sidelines of just hearing the blowback from it, and you know, hearing the critical consensus of it, you got the sense that like people were like, "Oh, does he really have, the right subtlety to tell this story?" And he's kind of very blunt about it, and they're like, "It's not very clever." And
Well, yeah, because like the commentary that, oh, men are violent. Okay, yeah,
right,
all right,
right,
cool.
yeah, it's like tell us something new.
It,
But
and he uses a lot of like imagery of the Green Man and this sort of English, like pagan imagery, but it's not clear what to do with it. And I guess I'd put it kind of in the Annihilation category of interesting ideas, some visuals I will probably remember forever, but the characters themselves just feel like placeholders for the visuals to happen. And he's at his best when he prioritizes character.
now I'm a ask for John here, Tom, and seeing as you're really into Alex Garland even more so than we are, is this a movie that we eventually have to catch up with, or can we continue to skip Men and be happy?
I think you could probably skip Men. That's my sense.
Okay, so that's good because like I mean like I would assume we're tentative guys who like enjoy his movies, but if we haven't caught up to it by now, we're like, well, do we want to turn this on to be completionists,
Yeah.
or can we just like move on to the next one, whether or not Civil War is up to snuff?
Well, I guess to contextualize it, it's the movie where people turned on Alex Garland. So if it's worth watching, just see if that was justified, maybe.
Yeah, John, do you have anything else to add about Men, or your just sideline consensus about it?
Yeah, I think I'm happy to leave that one as an unwatched film for me, but I can't, I'm not like disinclined to watch Civil War because of Men or any perceptions of it or future Alex Garland movies. Like, to me, it's just kind of like a movie that came out that I didn't have an interest in and am, not interested in still.
Well, I think it's too bad as far as from my perspective, uh, Tom and John, because I really enjoy Jessie Buckley. She's one of my I'd say she's up there for one of my favorite actresses right now, and I love seeing her performances in numerous things. So to say like I'd skip this just because of whether or not it's good or bad, I'd hope that at least she was good in it, and
Oh yeah,
that would be worthwhile.
she's great in it, and I like Garland's sort of visual grammar in it. I think it's definitely building on what he's been doing as a director. There's a kind of a coherency to that style and that tone, and this really eerie music that he gets sort of in each movie and TV show, if we count Devs. So I mean, it's not a it's not like an incompetent movie by any means. It's just a movie that doesn't really work. I put it in kind of an interesting misfire category. Like it didn't bother me or offend me as much as people seem to be by it, to the extent that now his next movie must automatically be bad, and that's overwritten everything else he's done. I don't know. Like
Yeah.
it's a pandemic project. I don't know. It's what he could get off the ground at that time.
All right, and then of course, as we led at the beginning, he is finishing up Civil War. Presumably, hopefully, it's done. Considering it's about to premiere soon and come out in theaters. It's a bigger movie for A24. Certainly, they spent some money on it, and to see what happens. I don't know. I think what a lot of people's problems with it, Tom, from watching the trailers a little bit and just getting ideas like, oh, it's dumb that California and Texas would team up, and it's like you just kind of like have to be in this like fantasy world with him and imagine that like this is a civil war that he wanted to like put together as opposed to like, oh, it has to be South versus North, or it has to be like this the same kind of setup, because like it still kind of exists in his kind of, I don't know if he considers it his science fiction world. Certainly that's where he's always kind of operated in, is science fiction. So you have to kind of lead into that a little bit.
Yeah, I think what's not clear from the trailers and what I won't really be able to judge until I watch the movie is what tone are we supposed to be getting from it? Is it meant to be lightly satirical? Are we in just kind of like pulpy dread mode? If it's really self-serious, like a couple of his movies are, then sure, I think it's fair to complain about that. But I don't know. It looks to me like it's aspiring to be kind of like a provocative, maybe kind of fun, lightly satirical thriller with some action scenes on a bigger budget than he's been able to do before. With also Nick Offerman as president, Kirsten Dunst is in it. Seems like a fun cast, big tapestry. Seems like fun to me. Although, like I said, I don't know if he's having fun. I hope so.
Yeah, also notably in it is Kaylee Spaney, who was in Priscilla as the lead, and
Yeah,
I really enjoyed her in that. So,
yeah,
um,
she's in Devs too, and she's really good. So it's
oh,
cool to
all
see
right,
them develop a little bit of a collaboration here.
yeah, I didn't know that. But yeah, we'll certainly know soon enough whether or not Civil War hits or is a miss.
And the movie too.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, I mean, this being an election year. Um, anyways, we're gonna kind of pivot away from Alex Garland and move into our what you've been watching section. But before we get there, I'm gonna go over some places where you can find us. I can be found on Blue Sky these days, mhcolville.bsky.social if you're looking for me. I'm still running the newsletter at Substack, and it's the pictures there. Um, I wrote about Super Bowl trailers and the Beatles biopics, so something that we certainly touched upon in the news section here earlier. Outside of that, we have letterbox accounts, Instagram accounts. We'll see about how they're going to be updated soon. And what else did I want to add? Um, Let's oh, that's right. You can listen to us on any podcasting app, whether it be Spotify or iTunes or Stitcher. Stitcher's still a thing. We just like to say it nowadays. Look us up, download us, share us, tell people you like it, and so more people can listen and enjoy the podcast. If you have any comments for us, you can always email us at itsthepictures@gmail.com. That's another way to reach out to me, or I can like snail mail a text over to John and tell him that he needs to watch more movies, or have him on the show as a guest sometime soon. So John, I don't is not available on social media, and yeah, that's the best way to reach him is through the email. Tom, how about you? How can people reach you?
I'm on Twitter, or X, excuse me, the X, as Elon calls it, and Blue Sky and Threads. So it's just my name, which is hard to spell. So you might want to look at a reference point if you're trying to find me. But yeah, and I also have all my writing for the most part is on the Substack at theentertainment.substack.com.
All right, wonderful. Okay, so Tom, I know I told you before on earlier, but at the end of the program, we like to talk about what we've been watching that is outside of the movies that we had to do for our assignment here, whether it be TV movies, whether it be The Golden Bachelor, which is something that we've touched upon before. This is just your freedom time to say a little tidbit about something that you've enjoyed. And since you are the guest, I will let you go first.
So I just recently saw Drive Away Dolls, the Ethan Cohen, Trisha Cook collaboration, the solo Cohen brother movie. And I'm not the first to have this thought, but it's interesting to see how when Joel and Ethan split up, you just can see you can demystify their process to such a weird degree for these guys who kind of love to be these ambiguous geniuses who don't really like to take their process seriously in interviews. But Joel makes this very serious, very well crafted Shakespeare adaptation that's artsy and black and white. And then Ethan makes this goofy, campy sex romp that has just it's got so many derivative moments of other Coen brothers movies. They even steal some of the music from Burn After Reading directly in it, and it just feels so kind of like sloppy and goofy, but at the same time you're sort of like, I see why these guys were perfect for each other, because Joel needs someone to push him in goofier directions, and someone he needs to tell Ethan, maybe do another take at that.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard like really radical reviews on this one. Like there were some people who were like, "Oh yeah, I was there for the ride," and then there was other people who were like, "Wow, this was quite the disappointment."
I think it's funny. There's good stuff in it. There's good performances. It's not bad, but it definitely feels like, we got the perfectionist Joel, and then the kind of like, yeah, I'll half-ass it if it's fun, Ethan.
So what was the premise? It was like two women who have to like travel with a package.
Yeah, so they're two they so they're not really they need to travel down to was it Georgia or Florida? I think Florida, and they do a drive away service where they have to drive this car down to somewhere, and basically in true Ethan Cohen fashion, there's this mix up and sort of a botched crime where something has happened that's illegal. Somebody's been killed, and we don't know exactly the connection, but something related to that in a briefcase are in a car that these two criminals are supposed to be taking. But then the guy at the drive-away service thinks that these two girls are the ones who are supposed to take the package. So he gives them the wrong car. He gives them the car that has the package in it, and they are sort of on. They don't know that they're on the run, but you get these criminal hijinks as they're being chased, and they're just going off, and they're really just sort of one's really uptight, and one is Margaret Qualley, who's just super horny all the time, and so they go on all these sexual adventures, and then the crime thing eventually crashes into their romp, and it's just sort of a goofy movie until the crime kind of happens, and then it becomes closer to a normal Cohen movie.
Yeah, I know I had mentioned this to John during our last podcast, and he was like, "I didn't even know that was a thing that was coming out." Do you now? I imagine now you know it's a thing that's coming out, John. Is this anything that you have interest in seeing?
I mean, for me, it's probably something like I'd rent when it's available to stream or digital rental, but I don't think I'm in a rush to get out to theaters to see it.
Are you in the bag for Dune Part 2? The reviews came out. They're pretty glowing.
Well, yeah, no doubt. I mean, it was, if you recall, my most anticipated movie of the year when we did our episode a few weeks ago. So I'm no less excited about it now that the people who seem to have seen it largely are very enthusiastic for it.
Yes, I have my ticket for March 1st. I am seeing it in Providence on the true IMAX screen.
Beautiful.
I had the opportunity to go see a screening, and I was like, "F that!" I'm just gotta wait and see it on the biggest screen possible, and only 20 minutes away from me. So, yeah, I could wait a little bit more for a story I already knew how it went.
When I
But
saw Dune, if I could do a quick little story.
yeah,
So I see it in theaters. I think it was the Thursday night preview screening or something. The second the credits started, somebody in the audience was looking at her phone and she screams out, "Alec Baldwin just killed somebody!"
Oh my gosh.
And so that's all we talked about on the way home. And I'll be
I
thinking
can
about
imagine.
when I see Dune 2 as well.
Holy cow.
oh, that's good. That's almost as good as like I would see. I saw Francis Ha in theaters when it came out, and there's like a part near the end of the movie when Greta Gerwig is very depressed or what have you, and this older woman in the back goes, "She's gotta kill herself."
Oh
Just
no. Poor Francis.
yeah, I was just like, "Come on, lady." But yeah, I mean, audiences are great, aren't they?
They
It
can be. They
wasn't
can
great
be.
for my Dune experience exactly, but it was fun. It was funny.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's memorable.
Yeah.
Since I'm eager to hear John's review of Killers of the Flower Moon, I'm gonna save that for last.
Okay,
Does that make sense? Like delaying and
that's fine.
delaying gratification.
Sure.
So one of the movies I decided to watch, and it was probably because I had watched Conan the Barbarian recently because it came out from Arrow in a new 4K disc. I was like on the Arnold Schwarzenegger kick, and certainly I guess a lot of people are watching Predator these days too, due to the loss of the actor who co-starred in that movie, and he was in
Carl Weathers.
Rocky as well. Yeah, Carl Weathers. But I caught up with Kindergarten Cop, and this is a totally bizarre movie. Um, you look at the cover and you're like, oh wow, this is gonna be like a funny comedy. Arnold's gonna like play around with some kindergarten kids, and they're gonna get on his nerves, and he's gonna go, ah, and it's gonna be great. And but then the movie like starts, and like a guy is murdered in cold blood, and then this druggie is handcuffed to his dead body, and you're like, wow, this is not gonna be a movie that the kids see. But yeah, he is chasing after this guy who is a drug dealer, and I guess the drug dealer is determined to find his son, and Arnold works with a partner, and they get information about this kindergarten class that may be where the son is, and his mother might be involved in the process too, and he might have to protect them. And Arnold's idea was that he was just gonna go down there and like be the backup and like watch from the sidelines. And his partner was going to be the teacher, but his partner gets like stomach flu or some nasty virus, and he has to step in and be the kindergarten teacher. And yeah, it has a lot of that like haha funny. Arnold's doing like goofy things and being put into situations where he's uncomfortable, but then like it also has a lot of darkness, and it kind of has a difficult time of like towing that line. But there's a lot of fun performances. Is the woman who plays his partner is puts on a great comedic role, and she's really enjoyable in the movie. Um, and maybe it doesn't deserve like I looked on Rotten Tomatoes afterwards, and it had like a pretty bad score, and I'm like, it probably doesn't deserve that. I mean, like it's just like it's easy to watch. So I guess maybe people knocked it for that, and it's not like this highbrow like movie,
I
but
wanted a more highbrow Kindergarten Cop.
Yes,
right,
please.
right. Is this something you either of you have seen before, or
I've never seen Kindergarten Cop, no.
I saw it a very long time ago on TV, I think. I don't remember it that well. I have no insights.
yeah? I had a lot of fun with it. I think like Kino Lorber has recently released a new 4K restoration of it too. So if people are interested in that. And John, you're laughing, but like years ago, I guess on April Fool's joke, Criterion
Yeah,
joke
I
that
remember this well. Yep.
they were going to release Kindergarten Cop.
Yep.
So
That was pretty funny.
I'm glad that I got to catch up with it. And now,
This is the movie where he yells "Shut up!" Right?
yeah, and he's like, "It's not a Duma."
Yeah, right. Okay. I just remember the shout out because, well, it's a long story, but when I was in college, somebody was talking all night at a party and trying to sleep, and um, somebody just out of the blue just goes "Shut up!" and it like sounded exactly like Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I could not stop laughing for like an hour.
So I'm gonna set this up for Tom, John. Tom, John, for the past 2 years, has said that Killers of the Flower Moon was his most anticipated film, and he didn't get an opportunity to watch it in theaters. He was waiting around for the perfect opportunity to watch it, and I've been bugging him to watch the movie and give us his opinion on it before he leaves the podcast, because I would just be like, so I'd have to text him and then like report to everybody else, because everybody's been waiting with bated breath to find out what John thinks about this movie.
Oh yes, I'm sure they have.
So, John, why don't you tell us how you feel about your most anticipated movie of 2 years strong, Killers of the Flower Moon?
I don't have like I feel like there's nothing to say because like this movie's been obviously talked to death, but I thought it was very good. Obviously, people know I think the story or the general plot points that are necessary. I don't feel like I need to over explain it this long into the episode. But I think like my general take is that like it's a very good movie. It tells the story with like a lot of grace and with all the detail preserved. Obviously that means it runs extremely long, and I found that to be a major flaw, but not like so bad that it makes the film worse than something else. Like it's still very good, but like it is just too long. I do think that probably having seen it, like the miniseries would be a better medium for the story if you want to tell it with that much detail. Um, but nevertheless, like I found it compelling, and obviously, it's been said to death, but Lily Gladstone is phenomenal, and I think gives the best performance in the movie. DiCaprio and De Niro are also very good, and I don't have much else to add. I mean, does it live up to the most anticipated movie 2 years running bill? Like, no. Is it in my
Oh, doo
top
doo doo
10
doo.
of the year? Yes.
Oh,
Uh,
phew. It
I
pushes Kelsey out.
Yeah, I pushed Kelsey out. I haven't seen that many movies, so it's not hard for something to crack the top 10. But yeah, no, it was very good.
Let's put it on a different pantheon, and then we'll ask quickly what Tom thinks about the movie if he's seen it, assuming that he
Yeah,
has.
I've seen it.
Yeah.
All right. That like John, are you ready to put it on the pantheon of Scorsese movies, and even like say within the last 2 decades, where you would think of it?
Yeah, probably like middle of the pack. I don't think it's as good as The Irishman. I don't think it's as good as Wolf of Wall Street. You know, what else? Like Shutter Island, I'd say, yeah, probably better than. I'd say it's probably better than Hugo.
Do you like Silence more or
I'm not
less?
a huge Silence guy. That's like a zone of interest movie for me, where it's
Yeah,
like
right. You're one
watched
and
it,
done.
very good. I'm good on that front though. So yeah, like middle of the road for the last like Scorsese of the new millennium.
Did you have a problem with its perspective of like it was definitely from the white man's perspective, and like for the white audience, as opposed to being for the um Indian audience?
I don't know that like there's an issue with the perspective. I mean, I don't really know how you tell that story from the perspective of the Osage tribe or from Lily Gladstone's character's perspective, because the audience needs to know the information. Like we need to know what's actually happening so we can, yeah, we don't know everything that's happening, but we know we need to know more than she knows, because otherwise it's literally just watching a woman suffer for 3.5 hours. Like, it just doesn't really make any sense as a narrative arc. So I can't say that, like, I feel like it's a wrong perspective, and I feel like because Scorsese has a obvious reverence for the people, that, like, it's not like it's torture porn either.
Well, I mean, a lot of Osage are murdered pretty violently in this movie.
Yeah, but they were in real life.
Yeah.
So do you want, is it worse to sanitize that?
Well, that was the argument, wasn't it?
I guess so. I mean, I don't know what the argument was.
No, I mean that was from, they were saying like, oh well, this isn't for the Osage audience. This is for other audiences.
I think it's just for people.
So Tom, you said you saw it. What did you think about it?
Well, I think specifically on that note about perspective, the ending is interesting. Scorsese popping up at
Yeah,
the very end is
that was
almost
wild.
right, and it's almost him acknowledging his own thoughts about telling the story, about trying to take human history of these people and also American history and having to make it conform to a narrative. And I thought that there was a really interesting, almost meta element to the ending that I really was not expecting, but sort of it's the thing that made the movie more interesting to me than the story itself. Although I do like the movie. I will say, great instinct by Scorsese to have Brendan Fraser just burst in screaming 3 hours
Oh
in.
my
Every
god, that was so funny.
maybe every 3 hour movie should have Brendan Fraser burst in screaming.
It's like the whatever the bird was in Citizen Kane.
Yes. Leo was maybe my biggest issue with the movie. I felt like he's trying a little too hard to be dumb hick. Like he's hunched over like Joaquin Phoenix in The Master. He's got the teeth, he's got the ear. He looks kind of like Simple Jack at times, and that's never
Yeah.
anything about.
I mean, it's really hard to imagine him like that, right? Because he's a big AAA actor, and guy who's
He
like
hasn't been
always
in
known,
anything in years.
right? I
You know,
mean,
Yeah.
he
like,
comes out of, I don't want to say retirement, but out of, you know, a hiatus to do this. Yeah, it's very loud and in your face in a way that even De Niro, who can be that, isn't that.
Yeah,
right.
it's a good performance, but it's a little much.
I agree.
Yeah. All right. Well, I am glad you enjoyed it, John, and that you finally watched it. I mean, maybe we'll get your thoughts on 2024's most anticipated movie, Dune, on your next episode. We'll see.
Yeah, I'm not gonna promise, but it would be
Yeah,
nice.
yeah, that'd be cool. Tom, I'd like to thank you for coming on and sharing your thoughts on Alex Garland and just joining us for this podcast. It's been fun.
Yeah, it's been a blast. Thanks for having me.
All right.
Thanks, Tom.
Before we leave, John, is there any breaking news from the SAG Awards?
Oh, okay, yes, good point. So Robert Downey Jr. unsurprisingly did win the award for actor in a supporting role. And male actor in a leading role went to Cillian Murphy. So that was, I think,
Oh,
yeah,
that
that
was
was,
the
I
one I
think,
was waiting for.
expected, but not like a lock. And now you have to think, the favorite for the Oscar is now, like I said, a prohibitive favorite over Paul Giamatti, who I think was still hanging on there. Television wise, Succession, Bear, like all the usual suspects there. So
Yeah,
still
the
waiting
bear,
on
the beast.
actress. Yeah, still waiting on actress. Still waiting on the
Cast.
cast, which is the main, the big award of the night. So that's where we're at on SAG.
All right. You heard it here. And we'll see you next time on the It's the Pitchers podcast. Thanks, guys.
Take care.